Hello everyone, today I'm going to do a quick video before I start working on another mini-series I promised one of my fellow YouTuber friends. Now, it's going to be a short one actually, but more of a, more like a analysis video. Today in this video I'm going to be explaining what Amnesia the Dark Descent and what Amnesia a Machine for Pigs mastered that Amnesia Rebirth and the 90s horror movie Spiral could not. Now, I'm going to be giving a brief recap of all the games I just mentioned, more specifically the parts I want to mention to avoid spoilers. Also, the Spiral is a 90s movie, so yeah, I'm also going to be recapping that part. And I'm going to be explaining what in my opinion made Amnesia the Dark Descent and Machine for Pigs really good in handling the subject we're talking about today, that Amnesia Rebirth and Spiral absolutely went garbage fire on. So Amnesia the Dark Descent is basically in a very short summary about losing your memories. But if I were to go on a slightly longer summary, it's about like supernatural things happening in the 1800s and having amnesia. Long story short, there are supernatural and scientific aspects in it. For example, there are many instances where we could see anatomical diagrams of living entities, while other forms of supernatural horror just say that, oh, there's just a big lump of flesh inside of creatures that has the soul. But no, yeah. Also, the Dark Descent makes references to like science many times, and even like suggests that the supernatural might actually be like a very complex form of science. But yeah, it has electricity, steam engines, basically just a supernatural setting with sci-fi implications. From Amnesia Machine for Pigs is an indirect sequel to The Dark Descent, despite many saying that it is not connected. It is connected. Once again, it's basically like supernatural in the 1800s, but more specifically, it takes place like 60 years after The Dark Descent, in the Victorian era. But basically, the scientific aspect of it is that it includes the existence of cells, which makes sense because already by the time the Dark Descent takes place, cells would have already been discovered. If I'm not mistaken, it was the 1640s when cells and, and microorganisms were discovered. Also, it goes into detail on how Vitae and Compound X actually works. To like, it actually influences the cells, which makes sense. Machine for Pigs is more scientific and political rather than supernatural, but it still retains that supernatural aspect. Now on to the bad side. Amnesia Rebirth, well, it completely went ham on the scientific aspect. Basically turned amnesia from like a story of supernatural stuff in the 1800s with a few sci-fi elements to straight up absolute sci-fi. Like, I don't even think Amnesia Rebirth should be considered an amnesia game given the previous titles. Like historical events with supernatural stuff in them, yeah. But Amnesia Rebirth was one of those games set in the 30s, 40s, 1950s, 1960s, 70s, 80s that are like completely sci-fi but basically just retro futuristic, one of those retro futuristic games like BioShock and Bendy and the Ink Machine. Wait, is Bendy and the Ink Machine a sci-fi or a supernatural? I don't give a crap. Anyways, I long I long stopped caring about Bendy and the Ink Machine actually. I should really revisit it. There are many theories I had when I was a kid, but yeah, I might as well revisit those, but I have so many plans. That's basically my own recap of Amnesia Rebirth. Well, yeah, I do admit the graphics were kind of good. I watched a gameplay of it, yeah, kind of cool, but at the same time, it absolutely like took down like the what made OG Amnesia so good. Like, in my opinion, story is like a really good element in the Amnesia series, if not all of video games. Long story short, make Amnesia Rebirth being an absolute sci-fi was just toying with me. Yeah, it absolutely bastardized the story though. Cut it. Machine for Pigs and the Dark Descent, like the Dark Descent had good gameplay. It had the good gameplay, while Machine for Pigs was good with the story and the logic and stuff. Rebirth, on the other hand, took both gameplay and story and messed it up really badly. Rebirth had a freaking pregnancy mechanism. Yes, that's a true feature. In terms of story, though, the characters are annoying and the actually enjoyable characters. When you actually find a character you enjoy, you notice it's part of some like stereotypical dynamic and crap, which just makes them more annoying than ever, despite how good they are. And the flashbacks and cutscenes. In the Dark Descent, I was okay with that, but at this point, you're basically just forcing an entire novel worth of stuff with me, with characters who I don't even like, who I absolutely despise. Honestly, in my opinion, there are like very few good things in Amnesia Rebirth. Also, they have a historical inaccuracy where there's a M1 Abrams tank, but those were post World War II. Rebirth takes place like 2 years before World War II. And also the orb, the orb animation looks kind of sweet, not gonna lie. And I also have a crush on one of the characters, but don't tell anybody. But that was just a joke. Still, the ones the characters looks kind of hot. Anyways, for Spiral, if I'm not mistaken, was made in 1997. It is a direct sequel to the 90s horror movie The Ring. Now, thing is, the reason why I'm dragging that in is because Spiral was an absolute, basically like the equivalent of Amnesia Rebirth. If like The Ring from 1996 was like The Dark Descent. Well, yeah, Ring was kind of like The Dark Descent in a way. Putting aside Amnesia and stuff, like Ring was like about the supernatural taking place in an earlier time period, the 90s. Well, yeah, Ring was released during the 90s, and the Ring movie set during the 90s. More specifically, the original Ring was released in 1995, I think, and however, it was set in the year 1997, so it's basically more of a futuristic version. Kinda odd how like 80s and 90s horror movies were set in the future despite being about supernatural, right? Sorry about that. I'm I obviously had to take care of my mom. Pay attention to her. Anyways, long story short, what made Spiral so bad is because it basically turned the entire Ring into a sci-fi. Not only that, it demented the story so bad. Like the Dark Descent and Machine for Pigs and stuff, like all had like a common dynamic. They like did something bad. All the protagonists did something bad, very messed up, and they need redemption. Ring, on the other hand, was basically about surviving the 7 days, but no, it was way worse than that. Rebirth, on the other hand, basically was basically Bioshock, but in the 1930s, and it's Amnesia. Actually, scrap the Amnesia part because Bioshock had Amnesia. Honestly, Bioshock would do better as an Amnesia game. That's just how much I dump on Rebirth. And no, I'm not a biased person. I did watch a playthrough of it and actually did play it at some point. But yeah, my opinions don't change. For goodness sakes, the monsters scare you to death. They don't physically harm you; they scare you to death. I was so happy that in the bunker they made the monsters brutally mangle you and tear you apart. But no, Rebirth just like the rich just go and like Tassia Trianon like suddenly becomes black, and then she just suddenly becomes black, and then the game ends because you went because the main character went black, and apparently the developers are so racist. You die because of being black. Now, anyways, Spiral, well, yeah, at the surface, it seemed like it would follow the original Ring's formula. While the Ring is like very similar to the Dark Descent, actually, in many ways than one. I actually like noticed many similarities, like how they didn't give a shit about how science and technology and supernatural were like put in the same room. Like, oh my goodness, Filipino horror movies and like old horror movies have so much in common. They like acknowledge that science is a provable fact out there. Despite the fact that there are literal supernatural stuff out there, they still acknowledge science in so many ways. Like there are many ways in like the Ring where like technology was used. Like if it wasn't for technology, like technology basically saved like the main character so many times. Like for example, Raiko would have like died from the curse if it wasn't for the fact that she and her like ex-husband like had a boat or had a car. They never would have gotten to the cabin or the island where they got that. They wouldn't never would have like got used a motorized boat if like that technology didn't exist. Then motorized they wouldn't have used a motorized boat to get to the island where they got the location of the cabin, and then they needed a car to get to that cabin because it was so far off. Similar to how in the Dark Descent, Daniel never would have killed Alexander and it was probably too late. If steam engine technology wasn't around, which he used to power an elevator to get down. Not to mention that he had to weaken the electrical force field that Alexander put around the entrance of the orb chamber using technology powered by an orb. Now, thing is, I actually love this. Sci-fi elements mixed with the supernatural. Freaking genius. Bloody genius. And I'm so happy that modern Filipino movies, aka movies from my country, and I'm so proud to be a Filipino, by the way, is like still continuing the trend of like acknowledging science despite many supernatural elements being basically in the same room as that. Thing is, Spiral, instead of like putting in Spiral, instead of like, how do I say this? Putting in the original formula, like adding some new things, but like expanding on the story, it absolutely bent, twisted the story so bad. Suddenly, the main characters are now evil. Like the main characters from the original Ring are actually trying to kill people, and basically they added so much science into the supernatural. Basically, at this point, I even question whether it's actual science or like supernatural at this point. They made, they added viruses to Ring. Apparently, you actually, Sadako doesn't actually kill you when you watch the tapes. A virus does. Because Sadako's DNA is recorded in the tape, and that DNA in the tape makes a virus that it kills you within 7 days, apparently. Yes. Let that sink in. And apparently about the twisting of the character and stuff, putting aside that they like already added too much depth to the original Dark Descent characters by adding too many references to them and adding in too much lore for them, too much additional crap that we didn't even want, that like we don't want. Spiral, on the other hand, the main characters evil. Basically, they would like plan to like spread the tape around and just kill more people. While in the original movie, the MCs of the OG Ring movie were supposed to prevent it. So yeah, that was basically the whole video. Peace. Terminate.